I chose The Old Settler, one because it was going to be Black History Month and around Women's History Month, February and March. And here's a story that is not really well known, and it is the story of my family. It is the story of Black women, in this case, my grandmother and my great grandmother, who migrate from Montgomery, Alabama, North Carolina, to New York, specifically Long Island. And they work in white families' homes on Long Island, and then they live in the city. And they do what was known as days work. And so I thought that this story was rich with history, but at the very same time, um, they had some twists involved that reinforced a woman, and in this case, a Black woman's opportunity to choose for herself what love looked like when she was declared by society far past age.
And I feel like this play, both from the historical perspective and from the perspective that there's a little bit of healing in it, there's a little undercurrent of healing, really plays into other conversations I've had about your work. So why is the healing theme so important to you to bring to the spotlight and work through as an artist?
I think that's a wonderful question. I think we can look at our world today and see that healing is necessary. And specifically for La Vie Mahav, this year we entitled our season, The Things That Happened to the Soul Over the Years, or What Things Happened to Your Soul Over the Years. So I think when you think of all of the things that can happen in the soul of a person, specifically in this case, of a Black woman who's born at a certain time, what were the things that happened in her soul, in her family soul, in her cultural soul, in her soul as a woman that still needed to be healed, that still needed to be addressed? And it was and it was comedic. And I know Celeste is on. We had the perfect cast, and I can say that we had the perfect cast. And the work really did, and thank you for acknowledging that. I think our country, our cultures need healing. And we were going to be able to do that through comedy.
I love that. And so as we're navigating these kind of uncharted waters, how can we reimagine the way we do art? How are you trying to scramble to reimagine the way that we do art or deliver art? Or is this whole crisis just shutting you down creatively? I hope it's not, but
it's not. It's actually the reverse. So I'll be honest with you. I'll take your questions in reverse. It is not shutting me down creatively, and I think if many artists who have been craving for time to do really look at what we have the opportunity to finish any number of projects that have been in the works. So, I had friends that went to Yale, and they said at Yale, you always had something in pre-production, production, and post-production. And that's the way that you were trained. Well, if you are an artist, and if you are a business person in the arts, you always have all of these things going at the same time. So this has afforded us time to do both the art and the business of art. So I actually feel more creative now because I have the space to be creative. And in terms of your first question, how we are reimagining it, the audience should know you even offered us a chance to do possibly a 10-minute reading from the play. We are having to look at our contracts with dramatists and playwright service and those licensing properties where we get our works, because we would have loved to perform it because we're supposed to be opening tomorrow. We would have loved to have performed a free stage reading of it. But then from a dramatist's point of view, when you have to give how big is your audience. So now the audience goes from an audience of 250, 275 to a live stream, or formerly known as broadcast audience. And so now you're dealing with royalties to the playwright, which I definitely understand. And you're also dealing with the rights overall. So yes, we are reimagining how we do this work. And I think the business part of show, as my godmother says, is not show business, it's the business of show. The business of show is being challenged because we don't do anything without the audience, or we do very few things without the audience. The audience is a large part of what live theater is about. It's not a film where you're just on the set with a camera. It's not television where you might have a smaller audience depending upon the show. We thrive off of the audience. So yes, we are reimagining it, and it comes with some challenges, but I think more than any other profession, I think artists are used to the ebb and flows and the challenges and rejection.
Well, but yes, I think artists are resilient. And this certainly poses challenges, but I think artists are kind of beginning to rise to the occasion, and this is an opportunity. So I hope we'll see more original work from you.
Yes.
From a business perspective, from a financial perspective, can you tell me how this affects our small theater companies financially? I mean,
Okay.
I think, on this week's podcast, we outlined it kind of in detail, but I really want you to walk us through it because I want people to understand.
Okay, so so I'm going to couch it not only as a small theater company, but as a small and new theater company. It impacts us greatly. Everything from, we don't have our own dedicated space, so and that's actually by choice. You're dealing with the renegotiation of contracts for when the performance was. And remember, it wasn't just our performance which was postponed or canceled. I was on the phone yesterday. I happened to reach out to Maureen Daly, who is at Fuquay Arena, just to check on her, see how she's doing. And it wasn't just our show that had to be canceled. Her entire season is being changed. And so the first part is, from the business point of view, we're having to renegotiate contracts with the venues, as well as now we got to deal with dramatists and the playwrights for the shows to find out when it can be done. And so again, I got to hear from the venues first to reach out to dramatists. So that's the immediate impact. The long-term impact is it becomes more challenging to plan the entire season when, for my company, we don't have a subscriber base yet. We have a very, very loyal client base. We have people who have followed us ever since we were ever since we performed at VAE Raleigh in 2016. So we have very important client base, but I'm not one to communicate with them without having some concrete answers. And so we are absolutely having to re-examine, if you will, the season. I actually called my strategic business person yesterday or 2 days ago, and I said, well, do we cancel the season? Because I have friends in the industry who are like the schools, which are canceling the entire year. They're canceling their entire season. So that's a blow to the subscribers. That's a blow to new patrons. So as a small second and a half year theater, I am being challenged with, how do I still bring in income in this time, keep the audience that we cultivated in the midst of not having any real answers.
And you're coming off a real high because your company just premiered at the National Black Theater Festival with Pooled. So you've got this wonderful momentum going. And
yes.
Now.
Well, one, thank you for acknowledging that. Thank you for coming to see it. And then remember, Lauren and everyone, we purposely took a break. So rather than leave pooled at the National Black Theater Festival in August and immediately go into a holiday production or fall production. We took a break so that we would be ready for February and March. And then here we have COVID-19. And so, yeah, we are coming off of a high, but I will say this, and I could be wrong. I think had we not taken that break, mentally and spiritually and emotionally, we could be bankrupt by now. Because we took the time to heal, to restructure, to see what worked, what didn't work, to reassess. And now we have a plan. You know, in this plan, in this time, I still have to get my website done. There's still some things that I have to do, so I make it easier for the patron, for the supporter, to give to La Vie Mahab and also to support. Those are things that we couldn't rush through with just doing another show. So yeah, we're coming off of the mountain, but I think that little pit stop just to rest and to reassess. And you understand performance. You can be doing a show. I'll say it this way. For the last 5 years, I've been on stage for Father's Day or Mother's Day or Christmas. And so it was always a run up to New York, come back in time. We got a chance to spend time with our family. So overall, my point is, yes, we came off of this phenomenal high, but we took the time to replenish our spirits as well.
And I'm going to ask you this respectfully, and you and I've done like 3 interviews now and we're friends. So you know where my heart is when I ask this question.
Okay.
Does this crisis, so many times when you see a crisis like this, marginalized populations are affected profoundly more than other people. Is this kind of health crisis, is this the great equalizer, or are our marginalized populations still affected in ways that your white counterparts are not?
Well, I actually was waiting for this question.
You knew I was going to ask, right?
And I was hoping that we had a very real conversation. So I think it's both. I think every theater company, from Broadway to regional to local to community, all of us are in the same boat. So in that way, it has equalized us. You cannot gather. So in that way, my company, which focuses on African American and African diasporic narratives, we're the same as something on Broadway, okay? But you are 100% absolutely correct. And I was trying to find some research so I could give you the numbers. As we know, whether it is an African-American, owned, operated Black theater, and its narratives are about Black culture, or it is someone else of a marginalized communities, we are going to feel the impact, I'm going to say, more profoundly. One, because our product is already specialized. We're already looking at a niche audience and we're trying to expand that. How much more when you have a crisis where, and although I will say, I think that La Vie Mahab Productions did extremely well with what our audience look like, our makeup, our demographics, and even our psychographics, as I learned in New York this past week. But I will say, yes, I will say that there are not just Black theaters, but I follow Black Broadway on Instagram, and even Black performers who are on Broadway, and it's still the great white way, let's just be honest. So even Black performers on Broadway are feeling it differently based on the parts that he, she, they may have. And so if you're a principal on Broadway, your rate's going to be different than if you're an ensemble. And so losing that check is going to mean more for your rent in New York. Gratefully, thank God for the mayor and the governor who stabilized rent and mortgage payments in New York. That helps. But yeah, so yes, there is a definite disproportion. there's a definite profound effect that is disproportionate. But again, when you think of how Black theater was birthed, is birthed out of struggle, is birthed out of a Black nationalist movement that says we should own our own, we should tell our own stories, we should own the narrative. I think that we have within us what it takes to survive, if we have access to the same funding that others have access.
And that is a more long-term, as you and I've discussed in other interviews, that is a longer-term problem than just health crisis. Yeah. I'm going to open it up to questions, and I'm going to tell people I'm not familiar with Zoom, but you all have the ability to unmute your microphones and talk to Moses and I and ask Moses questions. Does anybody have a question for Moses? I'm going to ask you, and most of the people on this meeting are other artists, so yes, we're all kind of preaching to the choir, but how can we as a community, as a public, support our local theater companies and support our local artists during this time? And then once we get on the other side of this pandemic, how can we support our local artists and companies?
Okay, so first, thank you for the question. VAE Raleigh has created a wonderful list that's going around that has so many different ways that you can support artists and theater companies and our productions. I hope everyone understands that whether you're small or you're small here in the city of Raleigh, or you are regional, there's staff on all levels that make the arts happen. And so it is our hope that you will not refrain from giving. So for example, if you were going to go see a show, if you were coming to see The Old Settler that was opening tomorrow and Saturday, donate your ticket to us. Why? Because we still had actors who put in a tremendous amount of time in rehearsals. And we still have, there are costs that are associated with all productions, whether you go on or not. So I ask that if you have the disposable income in these times to give, that you would consider giving or donating it. And if it's a 501c3, you know that that's a tax write-off for you. And the second part was, once we get on the other side of that, so this is where all of my training and all my reading from Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, talks about. She says of art that art is that which, how do I say it? It reflects society in that we are challenged to tell the truth. We are challenged to shed light on darkness. And so I ask that you integrate it as much of those activities which will shed light on what's going on in America. Get away from, here's the thing, I love Netflix. I'm hoping to have something on Netflix very soon. I love Netflix. But after this cabin fever that we're going through, get out and support live theater, live performance, live dance, live song, live concerts. Because, and I really want to say this, I should have started with this. Those of us who are artists, we are not just losing a job. We are walking in our purposes every day of the week. And so a part of our purpose, what we feel we were divinely created to do, has been put on hold. I've been divinely created, my belief, I've been divinely created to write stories that change other people's lives. I've been divinely created to act, to take on different characters that either challenge your biases or make you laugh or bring joy. That is part of my purpose. So part of my purpose has been put on hold. So when we get on the other side and you go, and if your job has not been affected, you are really blessed. But when we get on the other side of this, understand that this is more than just a performance for applause. This is our very lives. This is our very sense of being. And I ask that you show up for us.
One
that's it.
more question before I let you go. You
Okay.
were just in New York and you
Yes,
have family there. So,
I do.
what is the mood and the temper in New York with the people you know who are working and living there right now?
Okay. Not only was I in New York, I was on Broadway for 5 days, meeting with and talking to and learning from producers and marketers. Because everyone says pool is going to Broadway, but they never slow down to understand what that means financially, what that looks like. So after being in class for 4 or 5 days and learning and meeting these sessions, I can tell you this: one of the producers I met has sunk $20 million into Six, which is the new Broadway show. It was supposed to open the day that New York shut down.
Yes.
$20 million. And so, if you understand New York, and I'm getting to what it feels like, there are only 41 theaters on Broadway. And so, when your show gets to a theater, that's major because writers don't get paid until it gets on Broadway. You're paid if you're an artist, a musician, even your producers. It's minimal till you get to Broadway, and that's cut from underneath him due to no cause of his own. The mood in New York was unlike anything that I've ever seen. I am a proud 10th generation New Yorker, and I worked in the city for a number of years. Um, the Long Island Railroad, everyone was we were extremely cautious. If you coughed, like it is everywhere, we're looking at you. Um, Life was still going on because my last day in the city was the day before they shut. It was the day before they shut down the theaters. Since then, I've driven to New York City. There's no traffic, a lot less people. Um, and it's interesting because the things that make New York for me, the pizza, the pretzels on the corner, those things, those
The
things are shut
smells
down.
of the
The
vendors,
smells,
yes, who are
the,
out there
the,
making the food, yes.
the languages, being able to hear 57 languages when you get off at Penn Station and you walk 5 blocks, and it not being tolerance, it just being people being who they are. All of that is gone. All of that is on hold for right now. Or a lot of that is on hold. I will say that I cried tears when I left my mother this time to come home and handle some business for La Vie Mahab, as a matter of fact. Um, it was hard for me because 98%, other than my son, one brother, and two nieces, everybody's in New York right now. So that means I have generations who are all there, which is now considered the epicenter in the United States of it. So it's a mood, but as it was after 9/11, we are a resilient people. And I would say that of America, we are resilient. We will get through this, but I hope the lessons of slowing down and spending time with family and not having so many meetings and enjoying each other, I hope that those lessons stay and that we are not as frenzied. Yeah.